All right. Last week we started our new series called This Is Your Year. And again, there is something fresh. Yeah, there's something fresh about a new year, right? It feels like you have energy for everything, and whatever comes your way, you're ready to say yes to it. All right? Homework seems to be a little bit easier to get done. New friendships form. And you feel alive just thinking about all the things that you can accomplish this year. Right? Starting a new school year can be fun, even though school isn't. Right? But let's talk about last school year. Okay? Do you remember how much energy you had in September? No? All right? You had energy. It was still new. It was still fresh. You still felt like anything was possible. And then November came, and you started counting down the days until summer vacation or until COVID hit. All right? We got out early last year. But do you remember any of the goals that you had for last year? Right? How many of them did you accomplish? Right? You may have set out in the beginning with a ton of passion, but eventually the chaos of school made you forget what you wanted to do or the goals that you had in mind. But starting a new school year is fresh. It's fun and it's energetic, but eventually our passion starts to fizzle out. And when passion fizzles out, we stop trying as hard, and the goals that we have set, they become distant memories. Right? Sometimes our passion can go away because people tell us that, you know what, you can't accomplish your dreams. Right? When other people tell us that we can't accomplish big things, oftentimes, we tend to start to believe them. And sometimes our passion goes away because we compare ourselves to who we consider the best. But we know that our lives will never match up to who we consider to be the best. But that's not your story this year. This year is different because this year is your year. Right? This year, where you're going to accomplish the impossible, you are going to accomplish the impossible, and we're going to help you. Right? Do you want to make this your year? Right? Just like last week, turn to the person beside you and say, this is your year.
This is your year.
All right? Now turn to somebody else and say, I'm all in.
I'm all in, buddy.
All right? Now, I know that you can make this your year because when I look at you guys, especially the younger ones, I see so much potential in the future. But I'm reminded of a very young basketball player. He was a sophomore and he had one goal in life, and that was to play basketball. Right? He tried out for the varsity team. He worked all summer long, waiting and longing for this tryout. And when the tryout came and went, this 15-year-old boy checked the team roster to see if he made it. His heart was broken when he found out and saw that his name was not on the list. When he asked his coach told him this. He said that your shooting skills are just okay, and that you are average on defense. The final nail of defeat was when his coach told this boy that he was 3 inches too short to be a starter on his team. Right? Can you imagine being told that you don't have the right skills or the right body to follow your dream? Right? This kid could have accepted defeat. Right? He would have accepted that the people on his team were the maximum and he was the minimum. But here's the thing. This guy was all in, and he would not allow himself to stop. So he trained even harder. He pushed himself even harder until one day he earned his spot as a starter. This 15-year-old eventually grew up and became one of the greatest basketball players in the history of basketball. Right? This sophomore was, who we talked a little bit about last week, Michael Jordan. Right? He didn't even make the starting squad his sophomore year of high school. Can you imagine that? Michael Jordan. Right? Michael was not going to let his failure be final. He wasn't going to let one bad moment define his career. Michael was all in and nothing would stop him from pursuing his dream. But the question is, are you all in? Are you willing to do whatever it takes to accomplish what others see as impossible? See, when I hear stories like Michael Jordan's, I'm reminded of a story in the Bible about two men named Elisha and Jehoash. Elisha was this amazing prophet who had a very deep relationship with God. And because he knew God so intimately, he led his country through some very, very rough times. Everybody knew that Elisha's leadership could cause big changes. And Jehoash knew this as well. Now you ask, who is Jehoash that I'm talking about? We've heard of Elisha, right? Jehoash was the king of Israel at this time. And he was faced with a very serious problem. Right? Israel was constantly at war with other people, and Jehoash wanted to end this bloodshed. So, turn with me to 2 Kings. This is in the Old Testament. You can turn there while I set this up. But 2 Kings chapter 13 is where we will be. But we learned that Jehoash heard that Elisha was on his deathbed. At this point, Elisha was an old man, and he was about to die. And there was a chance, there goes the chance of winning if Elisha died, what Jehoash thought, right? So Jehoash went to Elisha, and he wept on the floor of Elisha's room, saying, Elisha, Elisha, war is coming, and you're dying. What are we going to do? Okay? And then Elisha decides to test Jehoash and gave him the most unusual advice. Right? Elisha told Jehoash to go grab his bow and his arrows, so Jehoash does this. Then Elisha told him to shoot an arrow eastward, and Jehoash shoots his arrows. Right? Look at verse 17. It says, then he commanded, and this is Elisha again, he says, open that eastern window, and he opened it. Then he said, shoot. So he shot an arrow. Elisha proclaimed, this is the Lord's arrow, an arrow of victory over Aram, for you will completely conquer the Arameans at Aphek. And some of your translations might say Syrians or Arameans. All right? Now you might be wondering, what in the world is this talking about? What Elisha did here was cast a vision for Jehoash. The arrow that you shot is where your victory is. You will fight your enemies until you have made an end of them. Right? The vision that Elisha was giving is clear. Jehoash's goal would not be complete until he had defeated everyone. And this was pretty unsettling news, right? Jehoash probably wanted a magical solution from the prophet of God, like maybe God sending a miraculous thunderstorm with lightning to just strike down the entire enemy's army without Jehoash ever lifting a finger. But instead, Elisha tells him, no, I'm sorry, you are going to have to work like crazy for your vision, for your dream. Right? This would be like Michael Jordan going to God and asking for a magical potion that makes him instantly great at basketball. But instead, God tells him, you know what? Your mission should be the NBA, and your mission should be that you're going to be the number one player in the history of basketball. Right? To a 15-year-old, that would seem impossible. But we know what happened, right? We saw this last week. How many has he got again? 6 championships. He is the greatest of all time. He is the GOAT, no matter what anyone says. Maybe Kobe's number 2. Anyway, but it can happen for you. But this next part is very, very important. If you keep reading verses 18 and 19, Elisha moved on. And he tells Jehoash this. He says, now pick up the other arrows and strike them against the ground. All right, so he shot an arrow out the window, and Elisha says, pick up all your other arrows and smack the ground with it. So Jehoash does what he's told. He takes out his arrows, and he hits the ground 3 times. But when Elisha saw what Jehoash did, he got super angry, right? Look at this. He says, you should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times. Then you would have beaten Aram until it was completely destroyed. Now you will be victorious only 3 times. Right? The arrows that Jehoash had were a test of how much he would invest in his mission. Right? Elisha wanted to see if Jehoash was all in, but Jehoash fell just short of what was available to him. Right? Jehoash was only willing to give some of what he had to accomplish his task. That's why Elisha was angry, and that's why we sometimes end up disappointed with ourselves, right? The question is, are you willing to invest everything you have to accomplish your goals? Right? Are you willing to invest everything you have to accomplish your goals, right? I don't know if y'all noticed these sitting right here. These are arrows with practice tips, so I didn't hurt anybody or cut myself, right? If God gave you arrows like these that represent your vision, how many times would you strike the ground for your mission? Right? Would you stop? 3 times? 4 times? 5 times? Vision will tell us where to go. Right? It will tell us where to go. And vision is good. We talked about it last week, right? Vision will tell us where to go, but if you're not all in, there is no point in trying. Okay? Elisha laid down some very heavy truth for us. But the way Elisha came to this truth should encourage us. Right? In this last story, we saw Elisha as an old, dying man. But I want to take you to another story where Elisha is much, much younger. Right? Elisha started out being the mentor of being mentored by one of the greatest prophets in all of the Bible. You should know this, right? He was mentored by Elijah. Right? Elijah was on fire for God. Right? This guy was so close to God that his life looked like he ate miracles for breakfast. Okay? So in 2 Kings chapter 2, if you turn with me there, we find Elijah talking to his pupil, Elisha. Elijah is about to make one of the most miraculous retirements ever seen because God said, I'm going to take you to heaven, directly to heaven. You're not going to die. And he had this crazy journey ahead of him before he did this. So Elijah tells Elisha, he says, stay here, for the Lord has told me to go to Bethel. But Elisha refuses to stay with him, and he says this. He says, as surely as the Lord lives and you yourself live, I will never leave. Right? As surely as the Lord lives and you yourself live, I will never leave you. Right? So the two of them go to the town Bethel, and then the sons of the prophets of Bethel come out to Elisha, and they tell him, do you not know that God is going to take your master away from you today? Well, what do you think this did to Elisha? Right? This discouraged Elisha, and if it were you and I, you would probably listen to them and let their words steal our passion. Right? But Elisha responded and says, of course I know, but be quiet about it. Right? Elisha responds with a biblical haters are going to hate type response, right? He didn't allow their words to keep him from following Elisha. In fact, he let him fuel himself even further, right? Elijah comes up to Elisha after this and says, stay here. The Lord has told me to go to Jericho. But Elisha responds again and says, as surely as the Lord lives and you yourself lives, I will never leave you. So the two of them go to Jericho. And the people flocked around Elisha to try and discourage him again. And they say, do you not know that your Lord is going to take away your master today? But what does Elisha do? He responds again the same way and says, of course I know, but be quiet about it. Elijah approached Elisha again and says, stay here. I have to go to the Jordan River. God is sending me to the Jordan River. But Elisha says, as surely as the Lord lives, and you yourself live, I will never leave you. Right? So the two of them go to the Jordan River, and catch this. This is really cool. Elijah beats the river with his cloak, his jacket, right? And the waters part, and they make a dry pathway for Elijah and Elisha to cross. That sound like somebody else in the previous parts of the Bible?
No.
Right? And when they reach the other side, all right, so Elisha witnesses this miracle happen right in front of his face. They go across the Jordan River. Elijah finally asked Elisha the most important question of Elisha's entire life. Right? Elijah says, tell me what I can do for you before I am taken away. Tell me what I can do for you before I am taken away. Right? The question is super duper simple, but Elisha's response is what unlocked the mystery of what it truly means to be all in. Right? Elisha's been discouraged 5 times, if you were counting, from following Elisha to this point. Right? 5 different times he had been told where Elijah was going and that he shouldn't go. And 5 different times he proved them wrong because he said, you know what? I am all in. Elisha had, in essence, struck the ground with his arrow 5 different times, and his answer to Elisha's question was his striking the ground for possibly a 6th time, if you want to keep up with that analogy. Right? Elijah responded with this in verse 9. Right? He says, please let me inherit a double share of your spirit and become your successor. All right? Elijah says, tell me what I can do for you before I leave. And Elisha says, please let me inherit a double share of your spirit and become your successor. Now, this floored Elijah. Right? Elijah, he was taken back a little bit by this request. And he says, you have asked me a very difficult thing. All right? And if you're not following along, here's why. Every person knew that Elijah thought that Elijah was the maximum of what God could do in their life, right? Everybody knew Elijah was the best prophet and nobody could get closer to God than him. But Elisha responded with what he wanted to do was to have God do more in his life than what God did in Elijah's life. He wanted to make double the impact of what Elijah did. And if you go back and read, Elijah did a lot of stuff and was famous for this. Right? Everyone saw Elijah as the maximum of what God could do. But Elisha saw Elijah as the minimum. Right? And here's the key to all this. He says, if you really want to be in, you need to know that our maximum is God's minimum. Right? If you want to really be all in, you need to understand the fact and know that our maximum is God's minimum. Right? If you look at people like LeBron James or Adele and you think that there is nobody better, that that's the best of the best, then you're not all in. Right? If you want to be all in, you need to start looking at those people as the minimum of what God can do in someone's life. Right? The greatest people of the world become the greatest because they believe that there was something greater to be seen in this world. And it's okay to look up to those people, right? I'm not saying don't look up to some of our celebrities. There are some I'm saying don't look up to. But what I'm saying is don't assume that greatness stops right there, that it stops with them. Remember, our maximum is God's minimum. Right? We serve a God of infinite power, and he wants to invite you into his infinity. Right? The world doesn't want another Einstein or another LeBron. The world is waiting to see the very first you. Right? You. The world wants to see what you have to offer. want to end with a challenge to you. What are your goals for this year? What are your goals in life? And can it be condensed into one solid goal? And if you know what that goal is, how much are you willing to invest your life into it? Are you all in? Because Jesus has a lot to tell us in the Bible about accomplishing goals. All right, so turn to Luke chapter 14, and while we're turning there, I will tell you my goal in life is to influence students towards the path of God. And I've never been on a better journey in my life than being a full-time youth pastor. I did the cop thing, I did the plumber thing, I did the Walmart thing. Yeah, I was a plumber for 90 days, got laid off. Best day of my life. All right? I said, I do not like this. Because never mind, I'm not even going to go there. Just say poop runs not only downhill, but uphill. Anyway, here's what Jesus says, all right, when he's talking about accomplishing your goals, okay? And listen to this with me and see if you can see the humor in this that Jesus says, all right? Because me personally, I can't prove this. I think Jesus was very sarcastic at points, especially when he's dealing with his disciples and stuff, all right? But listen to this. Verse 28. Jesus says, don't begin until you count the cost. For who would begin construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there is enough money to finish it? Otherwise, you might complete only the foundation before running out of money, and then everyone would laugh at you. They would say, there's the person who started that building and couldn't afford to finish it. I don't know about you. Can you hear the sarcasm in Jesus' voice here? Right? He says, you count the cost before you start something. Because otherwise, you might start something, you might only get the foundation of a house, and you're like, there's my house. It's just a foundation. Oh, yeah, I ran out of money. And Jesus goes, they'll go, ha, you ran out of money. Right? No one likes to chase dreams because we're scared to fail. Right? We're scared of failure. Right? And it's hard to tell others about our goals because when we don't reach them, others will know and find out that we didn't achieve this certain goal. But before you even begin this journey, you need to figure out what the costs are. So what I'm leaving you here with tonight is 2 practical ways to count the cost and to be all in. And the first is easy. The first one is map it all out. You need to map it out, right? If your goal needs to be accomplished this year, then you need to start mapping out what you need to do right now. Maybe you need to look at who is best, and you need to start figuring out how you can do better. Right? Our maximum is God's minimum. Right? What can you start practicing this week to accomplish this year? And number 2, not only do we need to map it out, we need to learn to subtract. Right? If you have only a few arrows, and I only have a few arrows because I don't hunt, right? 2 arrows. If you have only a few arrows, you need to figure out where you're going to be shooting them. Right? When I go duck hunting, I try to live by the philosophy, 1 shot, 1 kill. Right? That's 1 shot, 1 duck down, right? Kind of thing. Right? There's only 24 hours in the day, so you need to figure out where your time is going to be invested. Right? School is a no-brainer. Your schoolwork deserves your attention, but maybe you need to say no to some other things in your life. Right? Maybe it's the club that you joined, the sport that you're in that you're playing that you no longer enjoy. Maybe it's a boyfriend or girlfriend that keeps you out of church functions. Right? Most of you are spread so thin with your time because you are constantly saying yes to every opportunity that maybe you need to start saying no. If you want to make this year your year, then you need to start investing your arrows in the areas that you need most. Right? Find the one thing that you want to accomplish. right? You can't try and be a world-class chef, the best football player, the best soccer player, the best football player, I think I already said that, and play 5 musical instruments by the end of this year, or even in one lifetime, right? You don't have to do it all, right? Invest your time in the area that you are most passionate about. Now remember, I said this last week, I'll say it again. You don't have to be religious to start practicing this stuff today, right? A lot of this is practical life stuff. But I want to switch gears for a second, right? Last week I challenged you to consider trusting Jesus to be the vision for your life. And I asked you to trust Jesus to love you the way that you have always wanted to be loved. Okay? But I hate it when people try and sell me something amazing and there ends up being a catch, right? Which is why I really want to say and be honest with you about Jesus, right? This love for you that he has, it is unconditional, meaning there's nothing that you could ever do to earn it, right? It's free. He gives it to you freely. His love is free. But following Jesus does come with a price. Just like we mentioned earlier about considering the cost before setting out, if you want to follow Jesus, you need to consider the cost. Right? To follow Jesus means that you will no longer make your life about you. Your life is no longer about you, but that you live in a way that demonstrates that you are for others. That you love others. Just as Jesus loves us freely and he sacrificed his life for us, the cost mirrors what he has already done. To follow Jesus means that you love others freely and that you live in a way that you are sacrificing your comfort for loving others. Right? The cost of following Jesus is pricey. But he requires you to give your whole life and trust that he can do something bigger, something better with it. Remember, our maximum is God's minimum. All right, so what I'm asking you tonight is, what if you trusted God to take your dreams and bring them up to a level of greatness that you thought was impossible? All right, what if you trusted God to take those dreams and bring them up to a level that you never, ever even imagined? Right? That you never even thought was possible. But to do this will cost you everything that you own. Well, let me tell you this, it's more expensive to not give your life to Jesus. Right? If you never give your life to God, who is infinitely great, you're going to settle for a life that's the minimum. It would be a life of regret and wondering if you could have experienced something even greater, even better. But the greatest cost of this is when we refuse to trust Jesus with our lives, we are actually surrendering our souls to an even worse fate. It's true that a life without Jesus costs you an eternity separated from him, full of suffering and loneliness. So tonight, I want to be absolutely clear with you that there are 2 different costs on the table that you need to consider. There's the cost of trusting Jesus with your future, and there's the cost that will consume your eternity. The second one will cost you far more than the first. Last week, I challenged you to consider trusting Jesus as your vision for your life. And I don't want to pressure you into any decision because this is not a limited time like you can only accept Jesus right now or it's gone forever. That's not it. But I want to challenge you with this tonight. Will you consider counting the cost of your eternity? Will you consider counting the cost of your eternity? Let's pray.